Hey there, good morning. Good afternoon, Kalamazoo, I should say. Hi, I'm Chris Pradle. I'm Executive Director of Community Homeworks here in Kalamazoo. And we are so excited today to have Louise Pena, who's the new Historic Preservation Coordinator at the City of Kalamazoo, and learn a little bit more about Louise and his work and what his office does. But before we get started, I want to make sure to share a little bit about Community Homeworks if you're new to the organization. Community Homeworks is a 501c3 organization based here in the heart of the city of Kalamazoo in the Edison neighborhood. We are very proud to provide two primary focused services since we were founded in 2009, one of which is our critical home repair services, which we provide to income eligible homeowners in the community. And we do those services in scenarios where there may be existing or imminent health or safety risks in the home. And so anything from a furnace to a leaking pipe from the second floor. So we want to be here for our community for those who are eligible. We also do empowering education, and this episode is actually part of our education wing, but our idea is that we provide hands-on and virtual education experiences to really empower our community to tackle much of the repair and maintenance work in their home themselves. So anyways, without further ado, we're glad you're here with us this afternoon. And like I said, we have Louise here with us, and Louise is no stranger to the community. He's a Kalamazoo native himself, grew up in the Westwood neighborhood, and is a proud Kalamazoo Central grad, Western Michigan University Bronco, and went on to get his master's focusing on historic preservation at Eastern Michigan University. Also an AmeriCorps background as well, which we both share. But anyways, so we're so glad to have you here, Louise. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and welcome to your new role as well. I know it's a big responsibility and a lot of work in our community. As much of a historic, focused community we are in terms of preservation. So just to kind of start off, just so everybody can get to know you a little bit better, how did you become so involved and passionate in historic preservation?
Yeah, first, let me just apologize. There's a car alarm going off outside, so I hope it's not messing up the sound too much.
We can't hear it.
Awesome. I kind of fell into historic preservation, I suppose, on accident, I guess is the term that I use. I've always been very interested in history, but I didn't always know how applicable that would be in the job market. Like you said, after I got out of Western, I became an AmeriCorps member with the planning department at the city. I also didn't know you were an AmeriCorps member, so that's awesome. But and that's where I met Sharon Ferraro, who is the historic coordinator, preservation coordinator before I was. And she kind of showed me that there was a cool position at the intersection of history and then also the applicable field of community planning. And I fell in love with it then because it was such a cool way to be able to help the community in tangible ways, which is something that I was interested in, and still kind of nerd out on history, which is something I was also interested in.
Awesome. In terms of like your role as the historic preservation coordinator, I mean, what's your favorite part of that work?
Yeah, I think that I guess I have a couple favorite parts. The easy answer to that is being able to interact with people and talk to them and help them through issues that they might be having with their houses. Show them that sometimes the historic preservation way of doing things could be maybe more low impact or a little bit, I hesitate to say cheap, but more financially responsible than other ways, which I think is great. Saving people money is always great. And then the other part that's always great is being able to go into houses that I would have never had access to before because people have problems that they want to tell me about. And then usually they'll ask me, well, would you like to walk through the house? And I always say yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's probably pretty rare that you get the inside scoop of all the different historic homes in the community. Yeah. I know you just had the Historic Preservation Awards last week, I believe, and there were some pretty amazing honorees. I know there was one house that was, I think, on Kalamazoo Avenue that was like the Residence of the Year or something, but that one looked pretty special.
Yep, that was a sweet house. That was not one that I got to go inside of because it was rental units, but we did just have the Historic Preservation Awards of Merit last week on the 25th of May, which I think is a great way to kind of highlight people who are doing preservation work in the city of Kalamazoo. And highlighting and celebrating, I think, is so important to let people know that their work isn't going unnoticed and that what they're doing is important to the community. And it just gives them that recognition that I think is so important.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of passed the baton between Sharon Ferraro, who was a longtime person in your role, I think for almost 2 decades. And then you took over in January this year of January 2022?
Yeah, I took over on like December 28th. So I had 3
Yeah.
days and then kind of a break because of the new year. And then I stepped into it. Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for that background.
Yeah.
So kind of just head off to the next thing. Can you just tell us a little bit about the Historic Preservation Office at the city and, just kind of what your general responsibilities are in that role? I know it's a kind of a wide ranging one. So,
yeah. So we have about 2,070, give or take, historic resources or properties here in the city of Kalamazoo, which is a good number, I think. And I am kind of the overseer of all that stuff. I will do reviews on exterior changes made to buildings in historic districts, which we have 5 of. Sometimes they get lumped together weird, but we have 5 official local historic districts. A lot of those reviews are administrative and things like, repairing steps on your front porch or fixing a broken window. Things like that are generally going to be administrative. Sometimes if there's going to be a material change or a large alteration to the exterior of a building, that will need to go to the Historic District Commission. And I think that's a nice segue into, I am also the liaison, staff liaison for the city to the Historic District Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. We're very unique here in the city of Kalamazoo that we have 2 different historic commissions. The Historic District Commission administrates over all of the properties that are in the historic districts in Kalamazoo, and the Historic Preservation Commission is more of the educational outreach branch of things. So it's a unique opportunity to have that, and I'm always appreciative of that. I also, like I kind of alluded to earlier, also talk and interface with residents a lot, interface with neighborhood associations directly, and try to assist and help navigate some of the historic district things with them, hopefully to make it easier for them and try to find the best ways to do things.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of those services, so, say if somebody was a resident and maybe they don't even know if they're in the district. So I guess the first question would be like, A, how would they find out if they're in the district? And then B, if they find out they're in a district or a historic home that, would need to be guided by your office, like, how would they reach out to find out, what you could do to help them or guide them through that process?
Yeah. So first, finding out if you're in a historic district, you could always reach out to me, and I don't know if you have my contact info on the video somewhere, but you can feel free to blast it out to everyone and I can share it with you in any capacity. But that's always one way, and I'm always happy to take calls and talk through it. I always double check when people ask me because I want to make doubly sure that they are in a historic district. So that's one way. That's not always the most convenient way for people, though, because then you have to make a phone call or send an email. Another way is to check the city's website. If you just type in like Kalamazoo City GIS into Google, for people that have ready access to a computer and to the internet, there's a great map that we have put up on the internet, and it has a nice website and an interactive historic district map that shows both National Register and local historic districts. So that's another great way to check. And 311 through the city has also done a great job. People that are in the city can call 311, and they've done a great job of just kind of guiding people and telling them whether or not they're in a historic district. So I hope that kind of, and thank you for putting stuff down there, but I hope that kind of answers the first part of the question. And then for understanding kind of the what to do's, I guess, in a historic district, people can, again, always feel free to reach out to me and walk through any project that they're considering or maybe toying with the idea down the road. There are also standards and guidelines for historic districts in Kalamazoo that are on the city's website. Again, I do not have the URL off the top of my head as we've been in the middle of a website change, but those generally lay out what can and can't be done. I always like to say that there's nothing that can't be done, but there are certain things that have to go to the Historic District Commission. There's a pretty good approval rating at the Historic District Commission going between, I'll just say between 80 and 90%. So it's a pretty good going rate, I think, on that. And they're always, I think, willing to work with people as well. But by reading those standards and guidelines, they spell out pretty clearly what can be done and what can't be done, what can be done with administrative approval, so I don't have to take it to the commission, and then what can be done or what needs to go to the commission, I'll say.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, let's say, I'm a Vine neighborhood resident and I know I'm in a historic district. So you're saying, when in doubt, just reach out, kind of a mentality, and just to make absolutely sure about something. Is there any difference between like exterior improvements versus interior improvements in most of those districts or in historic homes? Like, I mean, are you generally speaking pretty safe to make changes in the interior without getting permission? Or, you know what I'm saying? Is there much of a difference between those two?
Yeah, pretty vast difference. I haven't brushed up on the ordinance this week, but in the ordinance, I think there is some language or in the standards and guidelines about interior changes. After talking to Sharon, it does not come up very often. You'd have to be making a very radical change in the inside of your house that would affect the exterior of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a really good general rule to follow is that the Historic District Commission and the historic districts in general only rule upon exterior work to a house.
Mm-hmm.
And that exterior work excludes plants, paving, and painting. So those are things that we do not concern ourselves with. And then you were saying, when in doubt, check out. I always like to think that that is the best way because then you can kind of understand. Sometimes there's misconceptions about what you can and can't do. Paint colors, for example. Sometimes people think, well, I've heard I can only paint my house some colors. Feel free to paint your house whatever color makes it feel like home to you. And reaching out also helps us create a relationship so we can move forward and work through things too. And I think that that's always really beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. For exterior items, it sounds like the most common issues tend to be windows and siding. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I would add a couple to that. I don't have a cool top 5 list, but I think that windows are always a really big one. Siding, wood siding, generally is another really big one. Porch repairs always come up a lot. Recently, I've been getting some asks for fences have been coming up. And then I think that's 4. Those are like the biggest 4 that I always see. Mm-hmm. There are some things that are much low impact, I'll say, like roofs are obviously ones that come forward a lot, right? But a roof is generally an administrative approval. And I think a roof is such an important thing that, if you're not changing the exterior appearance, if you're just reshingling, then that's great. And if there's no material change, if you're going shingles to shingles, then that's an administrative approval.
Okay. So let's say if somebody lives outside of a actual district, but they live in a home that's, 70 to 110 years old, is it possible that they would have restrictions on exterior improvements on the home?
So from my end, there would be none. I can't speak for neighborhood associations or anything like that. And I don't think that there are any restrictive neighborhood associations in this capacity in the city right now.
Okay.
The only other protections, not even protections, overlays, I guess you could call them, are national historic districts. And those do not impose regulations upon the buildings unless you're going to be applying for tax credits. You need to be careful then. Or if federal funds are going to be used on a building that has National Register protection, Section 106 review comes in. But that's kind of a deep dive that we could have that talk another day. But generally speaking, if you live outside of a historic district in a historic home, I don't have purview in those areas, but you can always feel free to reach out to me, even if you're not in a historic district, if you have any questions.
Sure, definitely. Okay. What are, in your experience, obviously you've only been here since January, but you've got experience, prior to starting in January, but what are some of the more common mistakes you see people make?
Yeah. So I guess we can kind of I'll divide it into 2 different kinds of mistakes. I think that there's like logistic or administrative mistakes, like just not asking to get work done. And then maybe using the wrong materials to do a job. And sometimes those go hand in hand. So example for like administrative would be, just not asking to get, like, let's say a roof get put on, because that'd be a pretty simple thing to do. And I'll just say it could result in a violation. Even if a violation was to happen, though, there is no charge for the first violation letter that I send out. And then I hope that since there's no punitive or there's no punishment associated with that first letter, I've always thought that hopefully that opens up a door to dialogue with that homeowner. And then if we can come to the resolution, I think that there's a 30-day window. Again, I don't have the letter in front of me, but a 30-day window between the violation and then when charges would be handed out. If we can talk before then and make a plan, that violation is going to go away. So even then, it's not really even a big mistake, right? It's kind of no harm, no foul. One that I think is a little bit more dangerous is making a material mistake. You could look at bricks as a really good example for this. If you had a brick wall in front of your house, or if your house has bricks on the outside and you use the mortar or the cement kind of that goes in between bricks that's not compatible with those bricks, the bricks could get rejected from the wall and either kind of dust out or completely get pushed out. And then you're kind of looking at a headache for yourself, which is no one's fault, but I just think that we could talk through those things. And there's a lot of resources to check. Are appropriate materials being used that are going to help the longevity of the house?
Gotcha. So, I mean, really what it comes down to is like, you see a lot of people who aren't following like the process that they're supposed to go through. And you see a lot of people who are like making material changes that are drastic or damaging to the historic well-being of that home or property or whatever.
Yeah, not even, I wouldn't even say a lot of people. I think I do see people, and it happens, mistakes happen, and to err is human. So I expect these things to happen. Yeah. And all mistakes are fixable, in my opinion. It's just about finding a creative way to do that that's also kind of conforms to the historic standards, so we can move forward in good standing for the home.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned the resource, like if they go on the kalamazooCity.org/GIS, GIS is the map system where you can look up, like if you're in a historic district.
Yep.
So, obviously that's a resource that homeowners can use, but can you think of any other resources that you would recommend to homeowners if they're looking to do some preservation work in a home or to make some maintenance or repair or improvements to their home?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great resources, and we're really lucky in Michigan. I'm probably just saying this because I'm from Michigan, but we're really lucky in Michigan to have a lot of great preservation people here in the state. So the State Historic Preservation Office, which a lot of people call SHPO, just because the acronym SHPO, they have some really good resources on their website that people can look through. It's like really expansive, actually. I like went through it the other day and I was surprised at how much stuff was on there. So they have everything from resources and people to reach out to, and people to contact at the office that can always help and put you in the right direction there. The Michigan Historic Preservation Network, which we call MHPN here in the business as well, another acronym, has a great yearly directory that they put out of resources as well. So those are kind of two high level things that you can always look to. The Historic Preservation Commission has also made some videos in the past that deal with fixing some of the most common things. And I don't know how many years ago now, but a great resource that I often point people to was a video that the Historic Preservation Commission made called Simple Steps to Working Windows, which goes through pretty much common window fixes, like taking out the bottom part of the window, the bottom sash, retying the ropes to make the window go up and down, putting in a new piece of glass, and then putting it all back together, of course, in the end. And that was made right in the Vine neighborhood. And I always think that that's kind of a cool resource as well.
If I remember correctly, they also did that OHOW, like old homeowner workshop, I think. And there's a few virtual workshops out there where you can learn about different architectural styles, over the course of building architecture history and whatnot as well. And those were pretty neat and informative as well. So
yeah, they were great videos, and I believe that they're on PMN, Public Media Network, and they're on YouTube around somewhere. So, and again, if you just type in Old House Owners Workshop into PMN, I know for sure because I found them that way before, and I think we released about 5 videos. Sorry, I didn't have a list of links for you here.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
And then Kalamazoo Public Library also has great resources. I think that to step back from the applied part of preservation, there's a lot of cool just learning things about the history of Kalamazoo that you can always do deep dives into. And the Kalamazoo Public Library has great resources about Kalamazoo history, which is so cool to me because it's such a granular level of history.
Yeah, definitely. So, this is kind of I guess maybe a little bit more difficult question, and you can kind of help people, our viewers, better understand this. But, one thing that we hear is that, there's definitely strength and value in like preserving, our structures and our history in our community, especially through buildings, and not just, tearing down because, structure gets to be 50 years old, especially ones given the beauty and the, I guess just like the workmanship that happened at that time period and whatnot. But you definitely recognize in some areas that are historic districts, or certainly in historic homes, they are sometimes in a situation where the homeowner is unable to afford the more expensive route to do preservation.
Yep.
And there's some people whose view is that although historic preservation is awesome for those who can afford it and have the resources to do it, for somebody who can't do it, it almost might have the counterintuitive effect of, deterioration in the home to the point that it becomes condemnable, or the person can't inhabit it because they can't afford to keep it up. And so I guess my question is, how do you respond to that? When you hear that and hear that kind of struggle that some people have or worry about if they get to the point in their home where they can't replace the windows and, they can't function or, whatever.
Yeah. So, and you're right. This is a big part of historic preservation. And I think that this is something that I've started to realize more and more in the role. First, I guess I'll just kind of speak to what you said initially about tearing down buildings. I think as we continue to move forward and we start to realize how important it is to save Mother Earth and things like that, it's important to recognize, I think, too, that famous historic preservation saying is that, the greenest building is one that's already built. And I think that that's always been important to me. A building is already standing and it has a lot of invested energy already in it. So tearing them down, besides, putting gas into the air and fumes into the air by all the things that are going to come and tear it down, is really sustainable in and of itself, because the building is already there and you're not going to get more costs added on through demolition. So I think that is one thing that I've always been very aware of, and especially as I've gone through schooling for this and stuff too, that's been really important for me to think about. Tangentially to that, or kind of to the side of that as well, if you have a neighborhood with a lot of houses that are old, and barring any historic district regulations, tearing them down to put up new houses, I think creates some new interesting situations as well. And I think that using the existing housing stock sometimes could be more financially equitable. Not to say that infill is bad, but I think that it'd be interesting to consider ways to use the existing housing stock as well.
Yeah.
So then getting down to the repair aspect of things, we can use windows for the example, because you did bring it up. Wooden windows, I think, are so unique. And I always bring up an anecdote that came through my life. I remember when my mom bought new windows when I was a kid, they were just short of sacred objects to her, it felt, because they were so expensive to put in these vinyl windows, right? We lived in an old house in Westwood that was built in like the 20s. I honestly can't even remember the windows before, but she had to put in new ones. And that's the first thing that I'm not crazy about when it comes to synthetic windows, like PVC or plastic or vinyl, is that the repairability of them is very low. You can't fix a window when it's been broken and it's made out of vinyl. And I'm sure that people would argue that, but it's made out of vinyl. I can't put in a new bottom part to the window if it rots out. Wood is very repairable, and I think that when they were building these houses initially, they recognized this, and it was the only material they had. So you can pick which one you want to lean into. So I really appreciate that part of the old materials, is that they are repairable. Finding then the skills to do it, I think, is something that I could really build upon throughout the community, because that'll, like we were just talking about earlier, empower people to be able to take some more control of their house. And then it makes you feel good, I think, when you fix things too. Some repairs do get expensive. I realize that. Painting houses is expensive and things like that. I think that we can always work with people as the historic district. Nothing is ever black and white or set in stone about any of these things, and there are always avenues that we can pursue. But looking at the DIY side of things more is important to me, and that's not always possible either. You have people that might not be fully able to fix their house, or the elderly might not always be able to fix their house. And then I'm thankful that there are organizations like Community Homeworks in town then as well that can help and step in with some of those things too. Sadly, as the historic preservation coordinator, I do not have any directly disposable funds to give to people. That's not to say that this is not at the forefront of my mind very often. But I guess those are my thoughts, and just in parting, because I kind of went off there. But, I think that the old materials are very sustainable. Mm-hmm. I get concerned about what's going to happen in the future with some of the materials like vinyl and cadmium is in vinyl and things like this. And I get worried about the future generations. And then I get worried about making more cyclical housing issues by putting in materials that might fail, that aren't repairable, that have to be repaired through purchasing. Gotcha. So I guess that is one of my biggest concerns. So education might be the best route.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're right. I think that education for people who would be able to, but I mean, just definitely like you recognize, I think there are a lot of people from, who might be aging in place in their home or had lost a partner who was maybe a little bit more handy, or, might be an individual with the accessibility issues to do it themselves. Certainly, income is a barrier, and, we want, historic homes to be for everybody. And I think that definitely begs the question, like for us as a community, to figure out ways that we can support people through that work, and so, that's going to have to be something that we continue to look and work on for sure. But I think to your point, education is a great first start. And, hopefully there can be organizations and, people who have the passion that can help people, with that as well. But I appreciate, your thoughts on that or whatever, but I know it's definitely, a concern for the community. So I definitely wanted to lift that up, and especially with the homeowners we work with. It's maybe a good segue to mention as well. One of the things Community Homeworks has been really excited to pilot this year, and we actually haven't spent any of the funds to do any of the 5 homes, but we we launched a new pilot beta program with the O'Connor Fund for Historic Preservation. And Pam O'Connor, who has a great history in our community with historic preservation, has been very active for many, many years, and is really a great consultant and mind on this field. Really had the foresight in recognizing that, our work here at Community Homeworks is really historic preservation in many cases. Most of the homes that we work on are 70 to 110 years old. And, they recognizing like a lot of these older homes, some of the costs to repair tend to be, compounded as well. And sometimes they're onions that get unraveled as well, and recognizing like if a homeowner has a furnace that goes out in the middle of January, and then their pipes burst because they didn't get the furnace fixed, and then the homeowner, leaves the home, or the home gets condemned, the home gets demolished, that's not historic preservation. And, and when you look at the fact that a $4,500 furnace replacement could have preserved a beautiful, 100-year-old home in, the Edison neighborhood, you start to realize that there's definitely an intersectionality between critical home repairs and historic preservation. So the O'Connor Fund, thanks to the Historic Preservation Commission, funded Community Homeworks with a pilot $10,000 grant this year to try out with a target of combining funding sources to support 5 homes that are of historic age in the community this year. And so that's really exciting to see that, that we're starting that. And I think that's a great first step to try to test this out and see, what we can do and what kind of home situations we can help save and keep homeowners in their home as well. So it's really a win-win situation. And I love situations like that work where it lifts up multiple things people care about. It's not every day that you'd see historic preservation working with a nonprofit organization that serves low-income homeowners. And so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I'm glad that we could work that out. And like you said, perhaps the most basic level of historic preservation is keeping people in houses, and houses don't really mean a lot without people inside of them. So they're not going to survive without people in them. In any way that we can work to keep houses inhabited is great.
Yeah. I think during the Historic Preservation Awards, I think it was maybe Stephanie Hinman was talking about the Kalamazoo State Theater, which was being honored, and just recently got a historic designation as well. And, I think it was Stephanie that mentioned that basically, what good is historic preservation? It's without bringing like life to a building, bringing people inside and having it be used to the fullest. And it might've been Dan Seitzman as well from the new KNAC organization in the First Baptist Church, but mentioning the same thing, that how cool is it that, that church has now been, revitalized to be used for, creative purpose for artists and for small businesses and those sort of things, to really see it being alive and used. And
it's wonderful. And I love to see spaces reactivated, and especially if we can, reinvigorate old buildings. That's always wonderful.
Yeah. And certainly with homes as well, there is nothing more satisfying leaving at the end of the day than knowing that our team has been able to keep a family or an individual in their home.
Yes.
and stabilize their housing environment and reduce the stress and trauma related to that. And know that, maybe you added significant more life to that house. And it's great. You mentioned this a little bit earlier about like what happens if somebody makes an uninformed mistake on a historic home. And you mentioned that, there's kind of like a notice letter that goes out. And, basically what I'm hearing you say is like, don't freak out if you get a letter from Louise and from the city of Kalamazoo, it's just, we need to get in contact and talk this through, basically is how that goes. And so like, it's not do all end all. If you get this letter, it's not gloom and doom. It's, here's our opportunity to make this right. If I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah. The first violation notice, like I said, is just, letting you know, hey, this work is not been approved. And it could be even as simple as you put on a roof that was okay, but you didn't talk to us. So let's just get the paperwork filed. Or it could be, hey, that wasn't the right thing to do. Like with the porch, let's say you did something that's not all the way correct. So let's try to work through it and see which way we can do it. That has, I think, the least impact on the financials, that also aligns with the house correctly. And that could either be the house owner and I, or generally the property owner and I can talk, or we might need to bring this to the Historic District Commission and let's talk through what the options are. And I don't think that the Historic District Commission has ever, and I can only speak for now, I suppose, not going all the way back to its inception, but I don't think it's ever meant to stand in opposition to anyone. I think it's just it's charged with something that it needs to do. But I think that there is a lot of room to make things work and work with homeowners and property owners to do what both aligns with the historic standards, but also suits. A great term is contemporary efficient use. So how can we make both of those things happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, I guess this kind of goes back, I guess this could be partially to the education response, but, like say if I'm a homeowner and, I'm not loaded, I'm not going to be able to, do a extensive from top to bottom, historic renovation, and preservation project on the home, but really like to tackle some things myself, maybe it's the windows and, that you have historic wood windows, are there any recommendations for, those homeowners to kind of like learn the technique or learn how to do it? And, is it just kind of like YouTubing it kind of deal? Or is it, are there people in the community that, are willing to volunteer and come out and help individuals learn how to do those kind of things as well? I know at Community Homeworks, we try to help with that from time to time and teach people with like window replacement and maintenance as well. But just curious if you knew of any other resources that people who are working on a dime can, learn how to do some of this work themselves.
Yeah. So I think you can always contact me first. And I'm always more than happy to come out to the house and look at it and just see like what's going on with the house. Windows, for an example, for a first-time homeowner, you could have a piece of glass that's coming out of a wood window, and that could seem like a really scary thing, but that could be a really cheap fix. All you need to go out and get might be a putty knife, and then some more glazing putty for the window again, which is not going to put you even above $100. So if your glass is still in good shape, then that's a really cheap fix. Mm-hmm. I'm always a little bit, I don't know if I want to say wary or leery of window companies too, then, because I think that they could tell you like, well, the windows are shot. So I think it's important then to kind of take a step back and look and see what's going on here all the way. So I'm always available. I think the pandemic really complicated doing window workshops for the Historic Preservation Commission. Just out of an overabundance of caution or a regular abundance of caution. I think we kind of took steps back from doing things in person, which I completely understand, because you don't want to put anyone at risk for windows. I think, you can work to get new windows, but if you get sick, that could go the wrong way. So like I said, we have some videos up, and there is a historic video that we did probably around 10 years ago. And I'm looking to organize some again for this year to teach folks how to work on their windows.
Okay.
And YouTube is a great place, but I think the entire internet can be know what you're looking for type of place, and maybe look for things that have, I guess, a lot of views and someone that you might think is fairly reputable. And however you choose to define reputable is up to you. But I think that people can kind of tell, like, okay, maybe this person is doing it wrong if he's going to fix the window with a hammer and he just broke it out. Right. So there are a lot of great YouTube videos. I spent a lot of time looking at them. So I think that those resources do exist. Another big thing is weatherization on windows that people get really concerned about. And again, I think that there are some things that can get created by people who have a vested interest in selling windows about the heat loss through windows. Weather stripping is something you can put in between, like the window sash, the part that moves, and then the actual frame, that can help block infiltration of air. Surprisingly, blinds and stuff do a lot for heat loss in windows, which I was really surprised to learn about, because they create an extra barrier. Ever since I was a child, I've put the plastic wrap on the inside of windows during the winter, and I think that does a lot too. And those are all much cheaper than dropping a couple $1,000s or maybe tens of thousands to get new windows put into your home, right? And I think that those are great, simple fixes. I know we only covered windows, but painting exteriors of houses, be careful of lead and stuff. And I have lead tests and lead safety handbooks in my office. So if you run into something where you might be concerned, you can always talk. But painting a house, I think, is not always as hard as it might seem, especially if you're taking care of small spots, which routine maintenance could make it so you don't have to do a huge job later. Chipping off the paint that's kind of messed up, feather sanding it out a little bit, and then just putting some spot treatments on can really help protect that wood in the long run as well.
Nice. Very good. So what do you see from like the preservation landscape? What do you see as some of the greatest challenges facing historic preservation in our community, and I guess maybe just nationwide even?
Yeah. I think the biggest one, which is hard to reconcile with for a lot of people, I think, is there's a lot of racial inequity in the representation of historic preservation. Historically, I think a lot of, again, no pun for historically, but I think a lot of houses that have been recognized as historically significant are recognized because of their architectural beauty, and maybe not because of other community things that are tied around the house, which means that they were probably going to own to or belong to originally to people that were rather wealthy. And I think that historically in Michigan, that was probably, it's a majority of those people might have been wealthy, heterosexual, Anglo-Saxon white people, right? So that means you're excluding so many different sectors of the community from that. The Historic Preservation Commission has made it one of their goals in the future to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making working on context statements and recognizing places from all different walks of life, I guess, through historic preservation. And I think that that's so important to bring everyone into it, because there's nothing better than having your history recognized and showing that you do matter. Maybe your house isn't as crazy as the most expensive house in town, but I think it still has a story. And there can still be recognition on some level. It doesn't need to be designation or anything, but we can still look at that to recognize it. So to me, that's been the biggest one, I suppose.
Yeah.
The second thing I think is it ties right back into one of your earlier questions about what are we going to do about the financials on some of these fronts for preserving some of these houses, making sure that they can be nice spaces for people to live, even though they're old. And maybe that a lot of it, like I said, comes through education and kind of navigating some of what's true and what's not true about an old house, what's actually wrong and what's not actually wrong with them. And I think that if we can continue to maintain them, they'll be nicer for the future generations. And then again, hopefully we can combat some of the cyclical problems that we have with housing, because if you can keep the housing stock nice, you're keeping the housing stock nice. And I think that's something really great for future generations to have.
Yeah.
Those are, to me, are the biggest two.
Yeah. Obviously you hear a lot of people talk about like the housing crisis we're seeing nationwide, and certainly even here locally. And do you see historic preservation as like a part of that equation to resolving the housing crisis?
Yeah, I think so. You touched on it eloquently earlier, talking about how, the work that Community Homeworks does is preservation a lot of times, because you're going into older homes and trying to fix them up. So I think keeping that older housing stock nice is great, because generally it's going to be less expensive. It helps retain some of the identity of a neighborhood and that heritage of a place that I think a lot of people really appreciate, where they live and what they have in their neighborhood. And I think that's so special. I think at the same time, if a structure has come to the point where it's a public danger, I am not a person or a preservationist that believes that a building that is presenting public danger should be saved for the sake of it being historic. So then you have to pursue other things. And then that's when infill becomes the appropriate thing to hopefully get density back up in the neighborhood and not having a vacant lot. There's a lot of pieces to that, and it's not as simple as just that. But I think then sympathetic infill and looking at things that complement the neighborhood, help. But historic preservation and taking care of the buildings that we have and using them in creative new ways and making them hopefully into, there's multifamily or, duplex, all those things I think hopefully can help with the housing crisis, certainly.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that was all I had for questions. Anything that you can think of that I missed that you were hoping to talk about or share at all?
One thing that literally just came out yesterday, and they just sent out the email from the State Historic Preservation Office, is that the Michigan Historic Tax Credit will officially be launching again on June 15th. So that's very exciting, because I think it's been like 2 years, I think, that this has been talked about. So it's great that it's actually finally back now. So I am going to get some mailers put out hopefully by early next week. There's like 2,000 that I have to put out, so I have a little bit of work to do ahead of me there. But then the State Historic Preservation Office is holding webinars regarding using that state historic tax credit on June 13th, so Monday, June 13th. One session in the morning for commercial, and then one session in the evening for residential. And that's a 25% tax credit for eligible projects within the state of Michigan, as long as you're in a national or local historic district. I think that those webinars could be really helpful to people that maybe want to be able to use that. That's like one of our biggest incentives that we have, admittedly, is doing that. So I can share that link with you, because it was just floating around in an email, and I don't know if they actually put it up on the website yet, but I can share that with you, and all are welcome to that. They'll also be recorded, and then people can watch them afterwards too, if you can't make it to the webinar. It'll be an interesting first run with it again, because we haven't had this since 2011. So it's kind of like we've had a huge historic preservation credit. There's been a lack of that going on for 10 years now, and now it's finally back. So I'm really excited.
That's great. Good to hear. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we have for each of these like episodes we do. I know we're running low on time, but we like to ask some fun questions, just knowing that people are local Kalamazoo folks. So I have to ask. I mean, obviously you've been doing this role for a very short amount of time, but do you have a favorite historic home or residence in the city of Kalamazoo?
Yeah, I had to prepare with my book here,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, since I started working with Sharon Ferraro, the first time that I was an AmeriCorps member, and then I spend a lot of time in Vine. That's where all my friends live. The William Upjohn house, which is 530 West South Street. It's kind of like a big red castle looking house, has always been one of my favorites just because of how it stands. Also, though, right across the street from that is 605 West South Street, which was Frank Little's house, who is one of the first historians of Kalamazoo. So it always is also near and dear to my heart as well.
Oh, cool. Very neat. So we'll have to be on the lookout on those. I know the South Street is a real treat with historic residences for sure. What about his favorite historic site in the city of Kalamazoo?
Yeah, I had to think about this one a little bit harder. Again, I think I'll offer up two, which might be kind of a cop out. But Bronson Park has always just been great to me, especially when I was a kid. We would come downtown for like field trips and stuff like that. And it was always cool to be able to see the park because it wasn't the kind of park that I always envisioned as a kid because it's just a green space, but it's so nice in winter and summer and fall and spring. It's always such a cool place. And then I think that Woods Lake has such an interesting history in Oakwood because there used to be an amusement park down there. And it's just, if you haven't heard about this, it's an interesting history. And I advise you to look it up because it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, very unexpected when you see over there. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, Bronson Park is a very special place. I mean, in our town square and the history. I mean, in fact, one of my favorite historical figures, Abraham Lincoln. The only place in the entire state of Michigan that he ever visited in his entire life was Kalamazoo, Michigan. He came to Bronson Park and spoke in Bronson Park, and it's historically significant because they didn't even know what his speech was that he gave until about 1940, and somebody found the speech kind of that somebody had transcribed fallen behind a file cabinet somewhere at a library. And so now we do have the record of that speech, what was transcribed. And it was one of the first times that he publicly spoke outwardly against the expansion of slavery, which is, a pretty significant point. It's that you're starting to see the articulation of his public views as a public figure before he was president of the United States. So this is like clean shaven Lincoln, but that happened in our little old like Bronson Park in 1856. So there's a lot of really special history in that park. So yeah, I was glad to hear that's one of your favorites. Do you have a Kalamazoo hero or shiro? Someone that you really look up to in the community?
Yeah, sorry you keep giving me like one, and then I'm going to give you multiple. But obviously, Sharon Ferraro, my historic mentor, and just a wealth of knowledge. And anyone that ever has a chance to talk to her, she knows a lot about the city, and she's been here for her whole life. So she knows a lot about it, and she has showed me a lot of things and made me aware of a lot of stuff that I would have never guessed, and showed me the ropes on this job a lot. So I can never say good enough things about Sharon. And then both my mom and my grandma, who are also both Kalamazoo natives, who have always supported whatever I did academically and then professionally. But both of them have also given me a lot of great information about the city of Kalamazoo. My grandma also grew up here her entire life as well. And my mom always tells me crazy stories about, she was outside during the big tornado that happened in Kalamazoo. And those are just always wild and wacky tales from before times.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a favorite place to eat in the city of Kalamazoo?
Yeah, so it's actually a little bit outside the city, but Rasaria, which is on West Main, it's in the township, but it's a Malaysian restaurant that is just wonderful. So,
yeah, if you had a day off to do whatever you wanted, what would you do with your time in Kalamazoo?
Oh man, I personally would probably go downtown and walk up and down the mall, go to the library, go to Bronson Park, and then walk down to Vine just for relaxing time with my friends. And hopefully if you get up early enough, you can have coffee on the porch and just relax.
So. Oh, that's nice. I love it. So this is one of those complete the sentence type questions. So Kalamazoo is best at blank.
Yeah, I had to think about this one too. I think that Kalamazoo is best at just being itself and not trying to imitate any other cities and being great at what it does. I have always been ardent and very firm supporter of Kalamazoo, no matter where I've gone. And I just think it's one of the best cities, and we have so many little cool, unique things. So I really do think it's the best at being itself, and just trying to stay being itself.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And then lastly, this is the last question, and then we'll wrap up here. The best kept secret in Kalamazoo is blank.
Yeah, and you're asking all the hard questions, you know. I think that for people, I guess I can offer up a couple more. One of the best kept secrets is probably the Frank Lloyd Wright houses that are in Kalamazoo. I didn't even know about them until a couple years ago. They're in the Winchell neighborhood. They're kind of hard to see from the street, but if you ever get a chance just to drive by them and check them out, they're gorgeous, gorgeous houses. I guess that's the biggest one to me besides the mall. I think it's a cool thing that has such a unique history, and as Kalamazoo residents, we might take advantage of what it is, you know. But it's so cool. The first pedestrian walking mall in the entire country, designed by the person that made big malls, Victor Gruen. So I think that's really awesome. And I obviously couldn't say anything like the Promise or anything, because that's not really a secret anymore. But I think we have a lot of great stuff. So
yeah, no doubt.
Have a chance, and you're not here right now, come down to check them out.
Yeah, we're no doubt, we're much like us as humans, we're in a perfect place, but we have an awful lot to be proud of and a lot of special things here. And I'm a little bit biased, but I do love this place. Yep. So just to wrap up, hey, Louise, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody got a chance to get to know you a little bit better now that you're in this role, and maybe learned a little bit about historic preservation in the community and how you can help them. Again, Community Homeworks, I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. We have one of the best teams out there. I wouldn't trade anybody on this team for anyone. And, we are really working against a very difficult tide right now with inflation increasing and people's grocery bills going up and gas bills going up when they're filling up their tank. Homeowners are really starting to struggle, and we're starting to see a precipitous increase of people reaching out to us. And so I always give this plug. If you're passionate about our work and willing to help us out, you can go to communityhomeworks.org and make a gift to our organization. It really goes a long way. It would really shock you to know, in some cases how affordable, work can be in a home. A good example I like to give people sometimes is we do drain cleanings, and, it's a situation where somebody's basement is flooding effectively. And, we'll send in somebody for $120 or $160, and that homeowner might not be able to afford that in that time, but it prevents thousands of dollars worth of damage. I mean, if flooding increases in that space, their furnace and water heater might be damaged. They might have to get mold remediation and environmental cleanup and all that. So it's amazing what you can do for a little amount of money to help keep a homeowner safe and healthy in their home. So if you're inclined, please check us out and support us if you can. We're hoping to have some more of these. We got some really great, exciting ones coming up this summer, including we have Cradle Kalamazoo, who will be on here as well. We're going to be talking about the intersectionality of home repairs and infant mortality, and just talk about that connection and how we're working together on some recent partnerships as well to try to keep our kiddos and expectant mothers safe in homes. And so anyways, but that's all we have for today. We appreciate you hanging out with us here for the last little short of an hour. And again, thanks so much.